This is Team 4's Module 8 presentation on e-commerce abroad. Team 4 consists of Matthew Hubbard, Philip Tompkins, and Johnny Deeb. So our first candidate is Switzerland. Here we have the Swiss flag as well as a Swiss landscape. And Switzerland is a relatively small country with a bit shy of 9 million people. But they are a wealthy country with a high quality of life, high education rate, and a relatively comfortable standard of living. One advantage of Switzerland is that although English is not their native language, they have a relatively high population speaking English with moderate to high fluency as their second language, and they're rather used to doing business with English-speaking people. They have somewhat moderate e-commerce market. They spend a lot on luxury items and clothing items, which is good for our company because we're in the pet arena and also the clothing arena, and we rely on discretionary income, and it's pretty easy to facilitate payment with customers in Switzerland because all the usual electronic methods work well. Next up is Canada. Canada has a much larger population than Switzerland with almost 40 million people. A big advantage of Canada is that English is one of their native languages, and even the French Canadians tend to speak a bit of English. They're an educated people with a high literacy rate, and they're a rather wealthy country as things go, with a pretty high standard of living, which makes them also a good target for our products. They had a rather large e-commerce market, significantly larger than Switzerland, with 25.4 billion in 2019, and a rather high percentage of that, more than half, was from mobile devices, which shows that they're sort of a growing, modernizing market, and their market is growing. It grew 21%, or is expected to grow 21% in 2020. They purchase quite a bit of clothing and apparel, which is good for us because we sell pet-oriented clothing and apparel. So overall, they're a pretty good candidate. And finally, there's Japan. They're much larger than either Switzerland or Canada. They dwarf them with 126 million residents. They are not as culturally synchronous as either Switzerland or Canada. They have a high percentage, more than half of their population practices Shintoism and Buddhism, which are very Eastern religions and sort of reflect of their Eastern values and cultures. So a company that wasn't familiar with the differences in their culture might struggle to find ways to appeal to them through advertising and whatnot. But they are a much larger market. They don't speak very much English. About 25% of them have a moderate grasp of written English, at least, but only a very small minority practice conversational English. They are very educated, with 9 years from elementary school to middle school being mandatory, and then 99% of students choosing to continue to finish high school, and ultimately about a third of the population attain a bachelor's degree. They have a very large economy, 4.971 trillion gross domestic product, $123 billion worth of United States goods and services imports in 2019, and a total e-commerce market in 2018 of 166 billion US dollars. They're compatible with Shopify and Amazon Pay. They can ship with Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, so it's just sort of all the major services and suppliers and shippers. And they are a very pet-friendly population, with 11.5% of the population owning dogs and about 10% owning cats. But ultimately, we decided to go with Canada as our pick because it's just the most well balanced. It has a similar culture. It's connected to the United States by land, which makes shipping less expensive and less of a logistical endeavor. And although they're not as large as Japan, they're not as tiny as Switzerland, and they would be a good moderate market for us to move on into.